Hello, everyone. My name is Nadia Carlsten. I am a VP of Product at SandboxAQ. Welcome to this live webinar on crypto agility and quantum cybersecurity threats. Thanks for joining us live. We'll also be recording today's session, and we will be posting the link after the session. So please feel free to share that after today's session and make sure that some of your colleagues that were not able to attend get the link and are able to participate as well. So today we have a great panel, so I'm expecting a great discussion with our panelists. Throughout the event, please feel free to ask your questions using the chat box. I'll be monitoring that throughout the session. After the panel, we'll also have some time to ask additional questions, anything that we didn't get to, but feel free to ask your questions as they come up, and we'll keep an eye on that as well. We would like to thank a few organizations for helping us get the word out about today's webinar. Specifically, I would like to thank GovCon Wire, ITSP Magazine, and HPC Wire. You've helped us get a great audience today, so thank you. I will now briefly introduce myself and then our panel. As I mentioned, I'm VP of Product at SandboxAQ, and in that capacity, I oversee product development and product management across the SandboxAQ portfolio of products. We currently have three main product areas, in addition to quantum security, which is what we're talking about today. We have products that we're developing in the areas of quantum sensing, with an emphasis on applications in quantum navigation, as well as medical imaging. And we also have products in the simulation and optimization space. Prior to joining SandboxAQ, I was at Amazon for 3 years, most recently as head of product at the AWS Center for Quantum Computing. And before that, I was at the Department of Homeland Security, where I focused on cybersecurity and commercialization. So I'm joined today by a great panel. First up, my colleague at SandboxAQ, Marc Manzano, who leads the Quantum Security Group. Marc was formerly the Vice President of the Cryptography Research Center at the Technology Innovation Institute. Prior to that, he worked on implementing cryptography in a variety of secure communication products, including for electronic voting platforms. Marc has a PhD in computer and network security and a master's in computer science, and he's made a lot of significant contributions to cryptography research, including in the area of post-quantum cryptography, network security, encryption, and the intersection of machine learning and cryptanalysis. Over the last 10 years, he's also led the development of many cryptography libraries and protocols. So thanks, Marc, for joining us. We also have Michele Mosca. Michele is the CEO and co-founder of evolutionQ. And evolutionQ is a company focusing on quantum-safe cybersecurity. One thing to mention is that SandboxAQ recently invested in evolutionQ through our Strategic Innovation Program, and we're very happy to be working with the evolutionQ team on quantum and cybersecurity. Michele also serves as chair of the board of the Quantum Industry Canada and is a co-founder of the Institute for Quantum Computing at the University of Waterloo. Michele has a PhD in mathematics from the University of Oxford. He has been working in the cryptography space for a long time and is someone globally recognized for trying to help academia, industry, and government prepare for cyber systems to be quantum safe. Finally, last but not least, we have Kelly Richdale, who is Senior Advisor for Quantum Safe Security at SandboxAQ. Kelly has extensive experience with QKD, having previously served as EVP for Quantum Security at ID Quantique. She has also worked on blockchain-based payment systems at Libra and identity management at IDEMIA. Kelly has a master's from Cambridge as well as an MBA, and with her international experience, she has been a great asset when it comes to policy and regulatory aspects of quantum safe security, as well as tracking international mandates related to digital transformation. So I'm going to get things kicked off here, and I'm going to start with a question for Kelly. So Kelly, there has been increasing concerns over the potential threat posed by quantum computers and the threat that this will mean for quantum encryption methods. Why don't you start by giving us an overview of the current cryptography methods and what is it about them that make quantum computers a concern? What is at stake here?
So we start with today's era of cryptography with RSA, one of the best known protocols and most widely used. It was invented by Rivest-Shmir and Edelman in 1977. Actually, there were predecessors the year before from Diffie and Hellman, and it was the concept of public key crypto was actually invented by GCHQ in the UK, the kind of NSA of the UK, by Clifford Cox earlier in 1973. So public key cryptography, which you can also hear as asymmetric cryptography, is based on the concept that the encryption key is public and very distinct from the decryption key, which is kept private. So, for example, an RSA user would create and publish a public key based on the product of two prime numbers. The prime numbers you can think of as the decryption keys, and those are kept secret. Now, obviously, the maths is a bit more complicated than that, but that gives you the general principle behind public key cryptography. It holds the concept of a trapdoor function, where in the case of RSA, multiplying together two prime numbers to give you the large public key is easy, but going in the opposite direction, factorizing the large public key to derive the two prime numbers, the factorization problem is computationally very, very complex indeed. So this trapdoor function, these so-called one-way functions, are the basis of public key cryptography. And public key cryptography absolutely revolutionized. It was the digital revolution that allowed for the establishment of digital trust remotely that drove e-commerce and the internet as we know it today. RSA is a relatively slow algorithm, and because of that, it's mostly used to exchange symmetric keys, AES symmetric keys, where both keys to encrypt and decrypt the data are the same. And so when RSA exchanges the AES symmetric keys, it's the symmetric keys that are used to encrypt the data. And that's relatively important. We talk about the different threats posed by quantum computers later on. You can also hear in the public key cryptography space talk of elliptic curve cryptography, where it's based on the discrete logarithm problem, also computationally difficult to go in one direction than the other, so also has trapdoor functions, and it's much more efficient than RSA by about a factor of 10, so it's widely used in many of today's mobile communications. Basically, the challenge is that with the advent of a quantum computer, the public key cryptography will be rendered vulnerable. So you can think of a quantum computer as a massively parallel computer. And even though an error-corrected universal quantum computer does not yet exist, we already are on the way towards that. There's been significant progress, obviously, from Google, your previous company, Amazon, among others, in moving towards quantum computers. And the challenge is that there already exists an algorithm, a quantum algorithm, Shor's algorithm, which is known to be able to render both RSA and ECC, in other words, the most widely used public crypto today, to render them vulnerable. Basically, it means that you can, for example, for RSA, you can factor in polynomial time. What that means is that you can no longer consider that RSA is secure. Similar challenge with elliptic curve. Now, Shor's algorithm is proved to have this effect. What it is that it's waiting for a universally, let's call it error-corrected, fault-tolerant quantum computer to come around. There are many different theories around when a quantum computer will be available that could a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. We have an expert in the panel today, Michele Mosca. So if anybody has questions, I will happily shut them over to Michele for that topic. But what we do see is that all of the information coming out from the governments ascertain that we're expecting something. If IBM, for example, keeps to its current roadmap, we're expecting an error-corrected quantum computer that could potentially run Shor's in the early 2030s. The DHS, for example, has also published an infographic preparing for post-quantum cryptography, which talks about 2030 as the year when a cryptographically relevant quantum computer could potentially be available. So we're looking at the threat arising of a quantum computer being able to run Shor's algorithm, let's say anytime in the early 2030s, potentially even earlier, as this is a disruptive technology and we just don't know a lot of what's happening in some of the nation state actors.
Great, thanks, Kelly. So in that context, though, knowing that quantum computers, at least fault-tolerant quantum computers, are still a while away, what should customers start doing now? There's a lot of concern about this topic, and how would you talk to those customers about when they should start to worry, and what timelines make sense for them to start really thinking about this topic and preparing?
Well, I think there's two types of attack that you can basically do or there's two types of user application that you need to think of with Shor's. The first is if you are using public key cryptography in the context of a certificate. Imagine that you're a bank and you're signing multiple documents, hundreds of thousands of documents per day that certify that you, the bank, Bank X, validates a transaction of a certain amount of value to user or another bank Y. In that context, the certificate, your digital certificate, is based on public key cryptography. And in that context, it renders you vulnerable. In other words, somebody could come in, take over the certificates, replace them, basically break your certificate, and act as the bank and authorize transactions to non-authorized entities. There is, however, a more serious threat, and one which is should be taken into account today, which is the store now, decrypt later threat. And what that means is that companies and nation states, particularly nation states, are downloading data, intercepting data, and downloading it now in massive quantities. And the challenge is that if these encryption keys, the AES encryption keys, have been exchanged by the RSA or elliptic curve keys that are often used as a kind of key encryption mechanism, you can think, to exchange the keys between the place where the data is encrypted and decrypted. So what is happening is that that data, even though it's decrypted, is being downloaded now. And as and when Shor's algorithm is able to run on a quantum computer, the nation state can actually use that to decrypt the key exchange, the public key crypto in the key exchange, and start decrypting that data. And so the time that you really need to think about it is, if I have a quantum computer in 2030 and the information is being downloaded now, how long is my data valid for? How long do I need to protect it? You know, is it a credit card number which is valid for 5 years, or is it information, DNA information, which has a lifetime of validity? Is it the intellectual property of a pharma company? So it's really that store now, decrypt later scenario, which means we really have to act now. I'd love to come back probably later on to the challenges around migration, but I don't want to jump ahead of the rest of the participants on that particular topic. So let's come back to that later. But clearly, this is a very serious threat for governments, infrastructures, enterprises, basically every enterprise in our critical infrastructure.
Sounds great. And yes, we will absolutely come back to the topic of migration later on on the panel. So I think I'll turn now to Marc. And Marc, so Kelly has done an excellent job giving us a lay of the land and really talking to us about the concerns. A lot of people think that post-quantum cryptography is one of the silver bullets and maybe the solution for this. So maybe tell us about PQC, what it is, and why do we need it? How is it going to help us solve some of these challenges that Kelly has just gone over?
Yeah, sure. Cool. Thanks, Nadia, for the question. I think that one of the main topics that we need to start discussing is that post-quantum cryptography was something that the cryptographic community was already worrying about several years ago, before it became mainstream for the entire information security community. There was a conference called PQ Crypto that started several years ago that was the main venue for this particular community within our field of expertise. And they were mainly worried about the threat that a potential large enough and coherent quantum computer could actually cause to our information security systems nowadays. But it was the entire discussion was actually made very, very vocal in 2015 when the NSA published a quote saying that all partners or vendors that were still struggling towards migrating to elliptic curve cryptography should actually hold on, and instead of putting their efforts on migrating to elliptic curve crypto, they should start focusing their attention towards migrating to quantum resistant cryptography. Obviously, at that time, there were no standards, not even a standardization process that I will now discuss briefly. But this already was a really interesting mention on where the information security community and the cybersecurity experts should actually be focusing on from there onwards. And a year later, in 2016, NIST announced a standardization effort to seek new standards that were quantum resistant, mainly targeting key encapsulation mechanisms and digital signatures. There were 82 initial submissions, and the process has very recently, last July, selected a first set of algorithms, one key encapsulation mechanism, and 3 digital signature algorithms. There are still 4 algorithms present in the 4th round. Actually, only 3 of them are alive. I will mention this shortly. And these algorithms that are still pending to be revised by the community during the 4th round are BIKE, HQC, Machilis, and Psych, which we'll talk about briefly. The main thing that I would also like to mention is that while NIST is pursuing this PQC standardization effort, NIST has already standardized and has already official documents with respect to quantum resistant crypto. And they are mainly focused on stateful hash-based signatures. The schemes that are captured by these documents are the LMS and the XMSS algorithms. These digital signature algorithms relying on stateful hash-based signature schemes are very useful, but only for a particular set of use cases. We cannot use them as a drop-in replacement for all the use cases in which we use digital signatures nowadays. One of the things that I also wanted to mention is that while, as Kelly mentioned, while current public key cryptography mainly relies on the hard problems that prime factorization and discrete log bring, which are broken by Shor's algorithm, in post-quantum cryptography, the main idea or the main target was to try to find new hard problems that could allow us to build useful cryptographic primitives or crypto systems on top of that. And while NIST competition started focusing the attention on key encapsulation mechanisms and digital signature schemes, there are many other types of primitives that are still pending to find a proper replacement when it comes to quantum resistant cryptography. Another topic that is interesting is that in the case of post-quantum cryptography or quantum resistant cryptography, I usually use both terms interchangeably. The hard problems that we're talking about are coming from lattice-based cryptography, code-based cryptography, or hash-based signature schemes as well. Some of these problems have been studied for decades, and they are considered to be conservative because no one has been able to break them. And talking about breaking cryptography, so that's the part of cryptography that we refer to as cryptanalysis. When cryptanalysts try to break cryptographic schemes, that's extremely useful. That's what we use in order to be reliant on a cryptographic scheme to actually provide us with the properties that we assume that they are going to be providing in terms of security and privacy. And recently, we had two really well-known cases in which cryptanalysis made it up to the news when there were a couple of papers published breaking two major and well-known schemes present in the NIST PQC competition. One of them was the paper by Ward Boelens, a researcher at IBM Research, that was breaking Rainbow during with his laptop during a weekend, and the title became a mainstream topic within the information security community. And then shortly after, there was another paper that broke CyQ, which is the key encapsulation mechanism relying on isogeny-based cryptography that was present or selected to be part of the fourth round of the NIST competition. But unfortunately, due to this paper, obviously this scheme is not going to make it to the end of the competition and has been already withdrawn. Does this mean that isogeny-based cryptography or multivariate cryptography, the one upon Rainbow was based on, are dead? No. So this only means that we know that these specific instantiations of these crypto systems were not secure, but these fields are relatively young, and we can still expect a lot of super interesting stuff coming from them.
Great, thanks, Marc. I think that's a great reminder that this is still an area of research, that there's still a lot of cryptography research that's going on in this space. And some of these schemes are and go as more weaknesses are discovered. Tell me a little bit more about the NIST selection process. What's next with that? What is the timeline for final standardization?
Yeah. So right now, as things stand now, we have 4 selected algorithms: Kyber for key encapsulation, and we have the Lithium, Falcon, and Sphinx for digital signatures. These algorithms are already selected and will be part of the new standards publications that NIST is working on and that will be finalized by 2024. In parallel, there is a 4th round of the same standardization process. And as I mentioned, in this 4th round, there are 3 currently alive algorithms: Bike, HQC, and Michelis, the 3 of them relying on code-based cryptography. The idea is that NIST will select an algorithm or several algorithms from this last subset. And then once they do that, this first NIST PQC standardization effort will wrap up, will finalize, and everything will be published in 2024 as part of the documented standards that NIST is going to prepare. In parallel, NIST has already announced that in 2023, there is going to be a new standardization effort, mainly focused on quantum-resistant digital signatures. And why is NIST going to start a new process just focused on digital signatures when we are still running a process that was looking for some of these schemes? There are different topics to talk about, but the main reason is that NIST would like to get candidates and submissions from the community that have different properties from the ones that they have already selected with the standards that they have selected in the Lithium, Falcon, and Sphinx. And these different properties can be in terms of keys size or digital signature size, or also the performance that they reflect. And also, it's having new digital signature schemes will help us. Will help the community submit new ideas that have been published since the initial deadline for submissions of the first PQC competition, which was in 2017. And in the last 5-6 years, the community has come up with a lot of great ideas that will be reflected in the upcoming candidates.
Thanks, Marc. Thanks for this great overview of post-quantum cryptography. Now we'll turn to you, Michele, to talk about something slightly different called QKD, quantum key distribution. And we already have a couple of questions in the channel asking the differences between QKD and PQC. So if you could address that, that would be great.
Yeah, so maybe I'll, and great to be here, by the way. I'll just back up and frame where QKD fits, and it's already been touched upon. So when a typical sort of confidential transaction has three parts nowadays. There's the authentication part, which is often enabled by a digital signature, which has other purposes as well. And then there's the key agreement algorithm. Right? And there's post-quantum asymmetric methods for both of these. Very beautiful, elegant mathematics. You can also do symmetric key-based authentication, but there's nothing more convenient than the public key or asymmetric key approach to authenticating. You can use public key algorithms to establish a key. You need a little more mathematical structure in the algorithms. You need to establish a key called the trapdoor predicate, sort of in technical terms, right? So with the authentication, you can get away with hash functions, which are just one-way functions, basically. Again, key agreement, one-way functions with this extra structure. Furthermore, with authentication, there's no store now, decrypt later. If you want to break the authentication, you have to do it at the time the key is being established. Whereas with the key agreement, as Kelly mentioned, that you might not even know if you want to break that key, right? You might not be able to break that key, but you can store thousands and thousands or millions of these, handshakes, these key agreement, establishment, exchanges, and decide to break them later when you wish to and when you have the capability to. And that doesn't really apply to the authentication phase. And then you use that key to encrypt. And obviously, one of our favorite encryption algorithms would be the advanced encryption algorithm, so AES-256. We don't know how to break AES-256 with a quantum computer, so we often call that post-quantum as well, but it's post-quantum symmetric cryptography. The most critical piece in this is reestablishing asymmetric cryptography or public key cryptography, because that's the one quantum computing decimates, like really breaks completely. Whereas with symmetric cryptography, if you go to the bigger key lengths, the known attacks don't break those schemes. So those are the three phases. And of course, if you really don't even want to take a chance that AES or whatever is broken, you could use the one-time pad. Obviously, you need a lot of key to do that, so you can't do high bandwidth encryptions with that, but the option at least exists. So in a sense, the weakest or riskiest link, I don't want to call it weak, so the not as strong link in those three is the key agreement, because it has record now, store now, decrypt later, needs to be secure longer, and it has the most mathematical structure and the fewer known options. That said, the options have been studied for many years and they're being scrutinized globally around the world. So we're excited for them to be deployed to protect our digital platforms. But what QKD is all about, so in a classical world, we don't know how to establish a key through an authenticated channel without this trapdoor predicate assumption. So we kind of have to live with that risk of some kind. Whereas if you have quantum communication, you don't need the trapdoor predicate. You don't need any mathematical assumptions anymore. You cannot mathematically cryptanalyze a key that was established using quantum key distribution. Right? So it's a beautiful new addition to the tool chest that allows us to de-risk, take away the risk of mathematical cryptanalysis of our key agreement. And it works. It doesn't massively disrupt how we do cryptography. It's just an alternative to the key agreement phase. You still need some sort of authentication phase, and you have to decide how you want to use that key at the end. So it's a beautiful new tool in the tool chest. Why don't we just do QKD? Well, the more secure cryptography comes with greater costs and less convenience. So there's a trade-off, but trade-offs are good, right? It gives designers, people doing risk management, options to decide, what do I really need to secure by how much do I have to invest, or how secure do I want it? And we have various trade-offs, and we can make wise decisions. So QKD does need quantum communication links. It's kind of like, there are some technologies which need fiber communication channels, right? Fiber optics. They won't work on copper, right? So they're not a full-fledged, general technology that will work with any wireless, copper, and so on, you need optical fiber. Quantum is even more restrictive. I mean, optical fiber is a great communication means. You need special quantum-enabled hardware at the endpoints, but it's available, right? It's much simpler than a quantum computer. So we already have those options available to us. As quantum technology evolves, it'll become easier and easier to scale these quantum communication links to longer distances. We can use satellites. You can use free space of satellites already today. It's being tested. It's not commercially available, but that's the trajectory we're on to achieve longer distances. And as quantum memories and so on and quantum relays become available, we won't even need to secure these intermediate nodes every 100 kilometers or so. So the technology roadmap for QKD is very exciting, and it aligns with the technology roadmap for quantum researchers all around the world. And it'll move us closer and closer to a technology that's cheaper and easier to scale and certify.
Thanks, Michele. I think that was a great overview of QKD, and worth repeating that, I love the fact that you said this is another tool in the tool chest, right? These are not mutually exclusive solutions, and it makes sense for companies to look both at QKD and PQC in some situations. And this feeds nicely into the concept that at SandboxAQ we've been very interested in, which is crypto agility. And the idea that customers need to be crypto agile as opposed to treating this migration as a point-in-time problem. So Kelly, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about crypto agility and why that is really the key to being cryptographically secure in the future.
Yeah, sure. So I think we are at the end of an era. If you think about when public key crypto, RSA, and elliptic curve, well, particularly RSA, were created in the 70s, and we're now in 2020. I mean, we will never have such a long stretch of time where the same algorithm stays around. The key lengths get longer. There are more bits, but essentially it's been the same algorithms. And I think gone are the days when that really happens. We're going to have an increasingly dynamic environment where the crypto algorithms are reacting to new threats, new mathematical functions will come out. NIST is continuing to look at additional candidates that will be standardized over time. So really the days when crypto was hard-coded into devices, into software, those are really gone. They're creating enormous challenges. If we look at some of our partners and customers, they're looking through their panoply of systems, of devices. The crypto is hard-coded. Most of the time, they don't even know where it is. They don't know what crypto it is if it's an external third-party supplier who is providing them services or devices. So they don't know basically where the perimeter of their security is and where they're crypto vulnerable. So I think what's most interesting is that the requirement for crypto agility basically means that the cryptography is externalized. It can be provided as a service. And so as crypto algorithms change or new requirements come into play by that company, they can seamlessly change out the cryptography algorithms that are used to create their certificates, do the key agreement, as Michele mentioned, and use the crypto in the applications where it's needed. What is absolutely key is that this crypto agility also requires a policy management. So you can't just have the crypto agility, you also need the ability to be able to orchestrate it, to be able to pull in the relevant crypto algorithm which suits that application for that security level for the given infrastructure. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts, is how the crypto agility and the centralized kind of brain or orchestrator will work together for customers. What we see is that as the PQC algorithms are being standardized, and that's expected to be around a 2-year process, companies are already looking at the possibility of using hybrid cryptography. In other words, they mix the PQC algorithm, which is not yet standardized, but they mix that with a classical post-quantum crypto algorithm like ECC or RSA. And the advantage that that has is that it allows you to have the strength of the PQC algorithm in the event of a future attack by Shor's algorithm, but it also means that if these algorithms for some reason are taken out of the standardization process by NIST, or anything happens, you still have RSA and ECC in. And it means that companies can be compliant with FIPS and other current standards, which specify, in some cases, relatively prescriptively, what algorithms need to be used, and even down to the key length. So this gives you a kind of defense in depth of its own kind. And the hybridization works differently, whether you're using a key encapsulation mechanism or signatures. In key encapsulation, the outputs of both algorithms are fed into a key derivation function, which basically gives you the key for the asymmetric encryption. And for signatures, you can just think of it as layering. You basically sign the message twice. You just layer the PQC algorithm onto the classical algorithm and make sure that both signatures are valid once you're testing it. And the idea is, as the PQC is standardized, the goal is to move towards pure PQC algorithms in the future. But this actually provides a nice interim path.
Got it. So what about using PQC and QKD together? Is that something that organizations would need to do at some point?
Absolutely. I think, again, it really depends. I mean, Michele talked about some of the advantages of QKD. This has information theoretic proofs behind it on its security. It has different attack vectors, side channel attack vectors than software and software-based algorithms, has a set of limitations. It only works if we think of this as a stack on the OC model. QKD is really layer one, requires optical transparency to be sent either through space or through optical fiber. So, ideal for data center interconnect or on the 5G, main trunk links of a telco. And then on top of that, you can layer, as you move up the OC level onto the application layer, you can add PQC. I think, the concept of defense in depth, this is a kind of hybrid approach, but the concept of defense in depth where, you're using multiple different methods with different attack vectors is a very good one. It's absolutely used, it's a standard in defense and government. And it's being used more and more in the kind of financial institutions and enterprises that we're looking at. It comes back, I see one of the questions in the chat is about, maybe I'll just read it out. What's the difference between applications between QKD and post-quantum crypto? QKD is a way for the secure delivery of encryption keys. Post-quantum crypto, new form of encryption. In a case where hackers are able to breach the user terminal, QKD won't stop the hackers because taking control of the user terminal is essentially the delivery target of the QKD. Here, post-quantum crypto will be more protective. And so for me, this is an absolutely classic example where you can use both QKD and post-quantum crypto. QKD can be used for the key agreement between, let's say, the bank and the data center, where as soon as you arrive in the server in the bank, that server and the information on it needs to be protected through post-quantum crypto. So here you're layering the approaches. So you kind of wrap the post-quantum crypto around the information which is being exchanged. You can even, have QKD encrypting information which has already been encrypted using post-quantum crypto, and you can layer it in many different ways. I think the message is that the two are absolutely matched together. And one of the classic areas where we've seen QKD used is for long-term data protection. There are many different schemes where this is particularly beneficial. One that comes to mind is, for example, you have information in a cloud, you split up the symmetric encryption keys using Shamir's secret sharing. So you split up the AES encryption key into multiple shards. You distribute those over the different data centers via QKD. And then when you need to decrypt the information, you reassemble those keys or an M of N of those keys using QKD. And the combination of QKD and Shamir secret sharing can give you what is information theoretic security for long-term data protection. So I think there are applications where really QKD makes sense. There are layers of the infrastructure in the OC model where QKD makes sense. But the essential message is they should be used in combination with each other. They're not either or. They're really layered on top of each other.
Sharing is really the key, very important point. Michele, how QKD and PQC could be working together.
I missed the first part of your question, Nadia.
I'm wondering if there was anything you wanted to add to Kelly's if you had about PQC.
Yeah, I think she said it quite well. The risk profiles match it up nicely. And again, the weakest link, in a sense, can be made stronger with QKD, and then the authentication, the ability to access endpoints, where QKD is not offering a direct solution, can be protected with post-quantum signatures, for example, which can be based out of hash functions, which are very secure and would be very hard to compromise in sort of a real-time attack on an endpoint. So I think they do fit very well together and help you mitigate your risks.
Okay, yeah, sure. So how do organizations begin this transition and prepare their cyber architecture for migrating to quantum-resistant cryptography and enable quantum-resistant communications? So at Sandbox, from our experience, we've been working with some of the largest entities in several sectors within North America and Europe. And we see several common patterns that are repeated for these organizations that have millions of endpoints that they need to take care of, as well as on-prem infrastructure, as well as different cloud providers' infrastructure. One of the main problems that we see that is a common pattern is that while cybersecurity tools have evolved substantially in the last 10, 15 years, and we have really good malware or ransomware software that protects against these sort of threats. In the field of cryptography, we don't have these advanced tools that allow CISOs to go to sleep calmly without having to worry about potential risks that cryptographic vulnerabilities are going to cause or pose on their infrastructure. And the main reason is because usually the way that cryptography is present in a given infrastructure is some sort of a black box for system administrators or network engineers. Cryptography, it's usually hard-coded on some applications, it's embedded within some applications, or it's part of system libraries that are not very easy to upgrade depending where they are installed. And one of the first steps that we believe that it's going to be pivotal in this migration is for all these entities and for anybody that would like to migrate to quantum-resistant cryptography to have the necessary tools to know where cryptography is used. And this is what we referred to as having observability of where cryptography is being used, which endpoints or which devices or which software is using what cryptography, which protocols are being used, and when are they being used. And having this cryptographic inventory and being able to monitor this cryptographic inventory live then enables what we believe real crypto agility and the possibility for these entities to manage and migrate their cryptography much better, because first they will understand what are they using. They will be able to identify where they actually need to go and replace certain things. And then after they have that, then they will be able to remediate those issues that will be flagged from these inventory tools. And when it comes to actually migrate cryptography, this is something that we're also working on at Sandbox, but it's part of a wider picture that should be helping companies to manage the way that cryptography is used in an infrastructure in a more cost-effective and efficient manner. And it's not only focused on the PQC migration, which it is, it's going to be important, but it's going to be a very important topic anytime that we have to very urgently migrate our systems because of a cryptographic vulnerability. Tomorrow, there is going to be a critical issue announced presently in some versions of OpenSSL. And this means that system administrators will have to go and will have to find where they are using this version of OpenSSL in their library, in their infrastructure, and manually update it. What we advocate for is to actually put the necessary tools in the hands of our customers so that they can actually make that happen in a seamless manner. And we believe that transition to a crypto agile architecture should go through these steps.
What about how long does it take for customers?
In terms of timelines, so this is something that will take several years. It's not something that we can do from one day to another. First, because the standards are still being written and will be the first standards will be published in 2024. But then those standards should be influencing new versions of the cryptographic protocols that we're using in the internet and in all our in all our infrastructure. And therefore, this means that we will have to wait several years until we see a fully post-quantum infrastructure. This doesn't mean that we have to wait until then. This means that we should be anyway starting nowadays to put in place some of these tools to start having the proper observability that we believe that needs to happen right now. And then there is also, it's also an opportunity for us to experiment what's the actual overhead or impact of migrating cryptography in some of these critical systems. And this also gives the opportunity to some of the customers to plan in advance and be ready by the time the new standards and new regulations kick in, so they are ready by then.
You know, migration or evolution of our cryptography is now, we have to accept that that's actually part of what we need to be able to do more easily going forward, right? We can't bake in crypto and then hope that we don't need to change it again. So we need to constantly be ready to do this. It's a necessary part of our cyber immune system. And we're fortunate in the sense that this quantum threat is stimulating us to develop these practices and the tools to make them possible. We have to always have a crypto inventory and so on, an inventory of our information assets and so on, and be able to quickly pivot to new solutions as needed. The migration process, at a high level, it's the same, right? The details of PQC and QKD come later on, right? The first stages, and there have been a number of best practices that have been developed and shared now. The first phase, which any major organization really has to be already embarked on, is put the team together, give them the resources they need, the executive support, do the discovery, the analysis, the risk analysis, and have a prioritized view of what needs to be migrated and when, what are the dependencies and so on. Once you've done that assessment, you can start, the planning and migration and mitigation part and validation part. So the latter phase, so the first part is understand what's our most critical problem, what do we need to fix, in what order. Then you develop a plan and implement it, right? Some risks will just be accepted or mitigated, right? There's some system we're going to deprecate anyway. Others, they're going to need to be migrated. You really want to make it part of lifecycle management, not crisis management. It's a lot cheaper and it'll be more securely implemented. So it's in that mitigation phase where you say, look, it was our own risk assessment, told us these are our most critical risks. That's when you can start deciding which ones would really are the ones where you really want to benefit from the additional security that QKD offers, right? And then you can start the vendor engagement, the vendor exploration. So at a high level, they're mostly the same. The differences are the platforms for QKD are still evolving. So, but you still have to plan them in. Like, it's a continual evolution. And we're talking about the 5, 10, 15 years from now, time scaling going onward. So you have to, and again, the quantum technology for breaking today's cryptography is far more than we need to build the quantum internet, right? So these solutions, it's just a matter of time. They're going to continue to unfold and get better and better and better. So part of it will be timing, right? Does the platform already exist? For some, it actually does, right? Others, they're ready to deploy it in the short term. Others might depend on shared platforms, shared implementations of these networks, and so on. But you have to go, as Wayne Gretzky says, where the puck is going. So you have to continue to look at how technology is evolving and what are the scenarios, which systems need that higher level of assurance, and when's the right time to deploy QKD in those production systems. So those are some of the differences with QKD. And ultimately, with all of cryptography, we want scalable, certifiable solutions. And both of these sets of solutions are moving aggressively in that direction.
Thank you, Michele. So I think we'll turn now to some Q&A from the audience. We have quite a few questions that have come in during our discussion. I think I'll start with a question from Martin, who is asking, what is the current guidance from migration to post-quantum cryptography project, working group meeting that was established by NIST? Marc, maybe you can say briefly a few words about that?
Yeah, sure. So the national security memo that was published earlier this year was mainly focusing on urging federal agencies to start looking at this topic and getting ready, first by inventorizing what type of cryptography and where they are using this cryptography in their infrastructure. And second, by having a timeline towards migrating to post-quantum cryptography. So we believe that that was very important and impactful memo because it basically meant that the US government is leading by example in this migration. And it's not only urging some critical infrastructure related businesses or agencies or entities to migrate, but that it should be part of everybody's kind of top of the list action items to focus on.
Great, thank you. Another question that we got from Janice was, will quantum cybersecurity replace the classic cyber or exist in parallel? Kelly, maybe you can take that one.
Sure, would love to, and would ask Michele to also step in. I think what we're seeing is really the beginning of the quantum internet or quantum networking, different names for it. And QKD is one of the first instances of using quantum for in a cybersecurity environment. But definitely what we see in the future is the concept of entangled photons being used to share confidential information, for example, between quantum computers, where you're uploading critical information into the quantum computer in the cloud to be able to process that on whatever quantum algorithms you're doing that, whether it's data optimization or portfolio management in the financial sector, all of the different applications, drug discovery, all of the different applications you would potentially use a quantum computer for. So to me, absolutely. I do see areas where, they will my belief is they will continue to exist in parallel for a very long period. You're still going to need all your traditional cybersecurity toolboxes, let's call them, of identity management, zero trust architectures, all of those will remain in parallel, although some of some of the actual confidential information exchange may be using quantum networking and other quantum cybersecurity, if you want to call it. Michele, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, very well said. I guess I would just point out there's maybe two possible interpretations of the question. Actually, your answers address both of them. One is, like, are we referring to pre-quantum versus post-quantum? So I think eventually all cryptography has to have been designed to be secure against quantum-enabled attacks, right? But in the meantime, that doesn't mean we need to discard all the old cryptography, because it's very well designed and optimized to be resilient against classical attacks, which aren't going away, right? So that's why we have hybrid key agreement and so on to keep leveraging the great security against classical attacks while we start, folding in these quantum safe methods, which include both classical methods designed to resist quantum attacks and quantum enabled methods. And totally agree that these are not competing with each other. We need more tools in the tool chest because the stakes for cybersecurity keep getting higher, and these work well together. And the quantum internet will continue to evolve. Our job as security specialists is to figure out how do we leverage these wonderful new capabilities to build a more secure world.
Great. That's a great way to wrap this up. We only have a couple of minutes left. So I want to thank our panelists, Kelly, Marc, and Michele, for joining us today and for explaining quantum key distribution as well as post-quantum cryptography and what it's going to take to implement them and get customers migrated to these technologies. I found this discussion fascinating. A key takeaway, I think, for the audience will be that these are complementary technologies that address different sides of the problem. And if you want to learn more about these topics, you can contact us. You can contact our team of experts. We have some contact information up on the screen. And as a reminder, the recording of this webinar will be made available after today, so you can refer to it again or send it to some of your colleagues. So thanks again for joining us live, and thanks again to our panel for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.